your character to being a different one, or when we get round to doing the character selector, it might be that the second character that you can choose might have the animation. So you're welcome to add this code in anyway. It's entirely up to you. It's useful to have, because even if your character doesn't have the dying animation sort of like associated with it, if you happen to choose one in future that does, you can still use the animation will still run. So it's useful to just have anyway, but that's absolutely fine.
And maybe, Alex, there might be another animation against your character that looks like dying or
Okay, Oliver, that's again absolutely fine, don't worry. So all we've added since then, Oliver, is this if statement, which is on my screen now. Okay, now the next part of code that we're going to add is going to be sort of next to the is going to be next to this constantly loop. So that bit of code that we've just added is going to stay on the screen for a little while. But I'll just run through again what it's doing for you, okay? So what we're going to do, what this if statement is doing is it's just checking whether or not the value of our health variable is set to 0, okay? If it is set to 0, what's going to happen is our character is going to jump up a little bit, it's going to play the dying animation, and then it's going to set all of its side collisions to false, which means that essentially it can no longer interact with anything, okay? It can't sort of touch anything, it can't bump into anything, it's just going to be like a floating object, which can't do anything else, okay? So all of that is part of that if statement. So like I said, this next bit of code that we're going to do, I'll be doing just next to it here. So I'll leave that up on the screen for you to catch up, okay? It's absolutely fine, don't worry. Is everyone...
What Dan's also done there is, you see where he's got number health is equal to or less than 0. So if you use a different value for reducing your health, if it goes below 0, still the character has that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if the health of the character does dip, so like Andrew said, say you use a different value for like an initial starting value for your health, and then it happens to be the case of that maybe you land on an obstacle and the value of your health variable jumps below 0 and it goes into a minus number, using this less than or equal to symbol means that it will still run this bit of code even if your health variable has a value of less than 0. Whereas if you set it to be equal to 0, what that would mean is that if you were playing the game and your health does dip below 0, it means that none of this will run, because all the if statement will be doing is checking whether or not your health variable has a value of exactly 0. So having that less than or equal to symbol there is, it just makes it a bit more, it just makes sure essentially that your script will run as intended type thing, okay? So, like I said, we'll move on now to adding in a section which talks about what will happen after the dying animation has played, okay? Because otherwise what will happen is the dying animation will play and then it'll just keep on playing on repeat forever, okay? So we need to make sure that we tell the game, okay, dying animation has played, what happens next? So to do that, we're going to go to the animations menu and we're going to choose this when the animation idle has completed block, okay? Now, of course, the animation that we're playing isn't idle, it's dying. And the completed menu that we've got here, we're going to change that to looped, okay? So once it's looped through the animation once, it will continue, it will move on and it will finish. Now, I know that it might seem strange and it should be that it's set to completed. However, when we were testing this code out, if you set it to completed, it just continues to play the dying animation on repeat. So we have to change that to when the animation dying has looped, okay? So what we need to say is what happens after that animation has looped, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to go to this control flow menu, and what we want to do is we want to say destroy myself. So that means that the playable character will be completely destroyed. Okay? And then what we want to do is we want to reset our health variable to having a value of 100 again. Okay? So to do that, you can go to variables. We can say set number health to. And like we've done before, we can use one of these little tiny numeric operators from the operators menu, which has got the 0 on it. Okay? And we're going to set that back to having a value of 100. So now as soon as the animation has completed, we're going to destroy our playable character. We're going to reset their health to having a value of 100 again. And what we can do is then reset the animation so that it's back to being the idle animation again, so that when the level reloads, we're back to playing the normal idle animation. Okay? Now, of course, what we need to do is tell the game where does the playable character need to go to once the animation has completed. So what we can do is we can go to the control flow menu, and we can use this go to next level block, and we can change that to being current level. So every time the playable character dies, it will reset you back to the current level again. So here's the destroy me variable is under control flow, and it's the second one down from the top of the list. You should see destroy myself. And then the last thing that we need to do from the physics menu is we need to take that block that we used earlier, which was the set all side collisions to true block. So we're going to say now that the all side collisions are going to be back to true again. So what this block is essentially doing, this when the animation dying has looped block is doing, is it's essentially acting like a little bit of a reset. So as soon as the character has the playable character has died and they've been destroyed by landing on spikes or by the NPC, we get reset back to the start of the level again. The health gets set back to 100. All of their side collisions go back to being true, and the whole thing starts again as normal. Okay? So if you add that block of code in, and I'll pop it back on my screen for you again in just a second, what will happen now, as you'll see in just a second, if I land on these spikes, it should in theory play the dying animation for you. If it isn't working, do let me know, because for some reason it isn't working on mine. I'll just try it again just in case. Okay. Not working on yours either, Fizz. Okay, no worries.
Because you've got, you know where you've got touch again, touch. At the bottom of there, you set if.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, you see, there we go. Yeah. So as you can see, what's currently happening down here in this when I am touched get toucher section is I am going back to the current level immediately. What we need to do is just delete that block.
And it might be at the bottom of yours, it'll be in that loop somewhere.
Yeah. So what's essentially happening there is it is overriding, that bit of code there was overriding everything that we had done in that loop because it was just playing it straight off the bat. So if you delete that block, you should see that animation working now. There we go. Okay.
Dan,
yes,
Andy. Go up the code you've just been doing.
Yeah.
And I'm nitpicking here. You know the first if statement with the health on the left side there?
Yeah.
You would set all collisions false before the dying animation. Otherwise, the animation can touch objects and multiple.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So you can switch that one round so that it looks like that. Okay. Have you got it working, Daisy? That's good.
I think if you just show the other code that you've changed in this bit at the bottom.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think Jack's missing that.
That's fine. So Jack, it's from that when I am touch get toucher block, you should see a block in there that was go to current level. If you pull that out so that it just looks like my if statement does now, you should find the animation working, okay? Yes, you do, Alex. So we're going to fix that now, okay? So that's the next step that we're going to fix. It's you do become a ghost and you do start floating all around the level, okay? So we're going to fix that now. Here's the next step, okay? Yeah, absolutely, Oliver. So that's going to be what we fix now. We're going to stop it from being able to move around after you whilst you're sort of mid dying animation. Okay. Is everyone okay to carry on? Is everyone happy? Does anyone want me to go over anything else, or we just pop a question, anything up in the chat if you need help with anything? Yeah, it does. I know it does look very strange, Alex. Yeah, that sort of thing can happen. We'll fix that now. Don't worry. Okay, so Jack, we'll come back to your fixing the score, your issue with the score later on. Okay. Daisy, how do you get past the first character in the game? Okay, so don't worry, Daisy. So that's what we'll be doing later on. Okay, we'll be adding in a projectile so that you can destroy that NPC later on. Okay. I can see that. Yeah, are you still falling, Alex? Is that what's happening? Okay.
Hi, Jack. With yours, Jack, your code way of doing a text of instant text field. When you're creating the text, I think you put the score variable before the word score. So if you just swap those two around, it should work fine.
Yeah, so it should look like this, Jack. Create text with score, number score. So the word score needs to come first.
Yeah, so you have it the other way around. So if you swap those two around, that's the issue.
Okay. So as we've seen, you do have the tendency to be able to continue to fly around the game even as a ghost. Okay. So the next section that we're going to add is just a little bit of code where we're going to stop that from happening, essentially. Okay. Yes, that's fine, Jack. If you put a space after the word score, it should separate the two up. So that's fine. Okay, so like I said, what we're going to do is we're going to stop it from being able to fly around all over the place whilst the dying animation is playing, okay? So to do that, each one of these arrow key buttons, so when right arrow is pressed, when left arrow is pressed, all of them, even the released ones, are going to have these new if statements. So every single one of these blocks of code is going to get put inside of some if statements. Okay, so to do that, we're going to go to control flow, and I'm going to add in a new if statement. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, if the current animation that's being played is not the dying animation, then we're going to prevent our character from being able to fly all over the screen. Okay, so to do that, we can use another one of these operators, and it's the equals operator that we're going to be using this time. Okay. And instead of it being equals to, we're just going to change that to not equals to, which is the equal sign with the line drawn through it, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to say if something is not equal to something else, okay? So what we're going to be checking is whether or not the current animation that's being played, okay, is not equal to the dying animation. So what we can do is we can go to the animation block and we can choose this current animation block, okay? And what we're going to do is check whether or not it's not equal to dying. So if you go to the operators menu and scroll down again like we were earlier to that text field, the one with the quotes, you can type the word dying into there, and essentially what's going to happen now is it's just going to keep checking whether or not the current animation is not equal to dying, okay? So like I said, what we have to do is we're going to have to duplicate this if statement a total of 5 times, so that we end up with 6 of them altogether. And every single one of these arrow key blocks is going to have this if statement tied into it. Okay, so I'll give you an example. So if we right click on that and say duplicate, everything inside of my when right arrow is pressed block is going to go inside of this if statement, and then it's going to go back into the when right arrow is pressed block. Okay, so it's going to look like that. Okay, so Andrew has put a screenshot up on the chat as well. We need to do that with all of our arrow key blocks. Okay, so every single one. Now you'll note that with the when up arrow is released, there are a series of 3 different if statements inside of that block. Make sure that all of those if statements get put inside of this new one that we've just created. Okay, so every single one of them has to go inside of it. Okay, so I'll pop that up on my screen in a second. So for every single one of our arrow key control blocks, we need to put everything that's inside of them inside of this new if statement. Okay.
I'm just trying it now, and it just, you don't have to do it with the button, but do it anyway, just to be safe.
Yeah, so just to be safe, just in case, because sometimes, as we've seen in the past, Game Fruit can be a little bit particular about the way things are done. If you just, to play it safe, like Andrew said, have it in all of the arrow key blocks, it just kind of makes sure that it will definitely work.
So like down there, it has to be in both when the key is pressed, because that's one loop, and when the key is released, that's a different loop.
Absolutely.
One side or the other, you can see that there are problems with both them again.
There we go. So every single one of my arrow keys has now got this when, if current animation is not equal to dying, run this bit of code. And you'll see that with my up arrow keys, I've contained all of those if statements that were in there previously inside of this now one big if statement. Okay, so we've got several if statements. Let me know if you've got any questions.
Let's see if it works, Dan.
Absolutely.
How's everyone getting on with this part? Cool.
There we go. So you should see now that if you do, sometimes you do get a little bit thrown forwards, but if now, when every time I land on spikes, if I do land on spikes and I mash the arrow keys, I can't move. I know, Alex. It's kind of a bit disappointing sometimes, isn't it? Because you can have quite good fun when you're flying around as a ghost. You're welcome to change it back if you want to. Okay, so I'll leave that code up on my screen for now, and then in a little while we'll move on to the next section. Okay, which is going to involve adding a projectile so that we can get past that enemy AI that we created before. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about the if statements that we've just made? So Daisy, what do you need to change? Do you want to post a screenshot up in the chat? Because you can right click and just press undo, and it will undo all of the last action that you completed type thing. Just right click anywhere on the screen on the script and just click undo. Yeah, so like I was saying before, if statements are a really, really useful tool in programming. They're used sort of all the time. That's fine, Daisy. Yeah, so have you tried pressing undo and has it come back? Okay, that's fine. Yeah, so like I was saying, if statements, they're a really, really useful tool in programming. We use them all the time. They're really, really handy because they're able to, check several conditions before we run a specific part of code, because we don't want to. Sometimes you can look at something and think, "Ooh, I don't want that to run unless this condition is true," type thing. So they are really, really useful. So okay, Daisy, do you want to put are you able to put a screenshot up in the chat, and then we can have a look to see how we can fix that?
No, that's off front. Shall I share my screen?
Sure, yeah, you can do if you want to.
The game through stuff.
It's all right. If you want to, if it's easier, like I said, just do a print screen and pop that up in Discord, and we'll have a look at it that way. If it's a little bit laggy for you. Yes, Andrew.
While we're waiting, we want to show everyone why we had a bit of trouble with this. If you take the set velocity y out and see what happens, this is why we had a bit of trouble with this to start with.
So Andrew and I were doing various bits of testing with this to try and get it to work. So if we take this set velocity y block out, you'll see why we have to keep that in there. So like as I said earlier, it was a little bit confusing. It's a bit strange why we had it in there, but you can see that the moment that you remove that set velocity y block, you just fall through the floor, which isn't ideal. So having that block in there, it just means that instead of just clipping through the floor and falling into nothing, you actually do float upwards, which is much, much easier, or much sort of looks a lot better on the game, really, than if you sort of start disappearing through the floor. So you'll see now that with that there, we've just float up. It's only a very little part, just a very, very little bit, but it does mean that we don't just clip through the floor and fall into nothing, okay? Is everybody okay to carry on, or do you need a little bit more time on that? There's no rush. If you do need to spend a little bit more time on it, that's absolutely fine. Let's have a look here, Daisy. So, okay, so I can see, so you're on that when left arrow pressed block. Okay, so, okay, so what you've got there, from what I can see, Daisy, let me see, set velocity X. So the 2 blocks you've got at the top there, Daisy, the set velocity X to 0, set play animation idle. If you take those out, I think you should be okay. That should fix the problem for you then. So the only blocks you should have inside of that if statement now, Daisy, are set velocity X number speed times multiplied by -1, play animation run, and set X scale of myself to -1. You should only have those 3 blocks. I've put them up on my screen for you to see. Those are the blocks that you should have in there. Okay.
Should it be the same on the right?
Absolutely. So for the right arrow pressed, the only thing that you should have in there is set velocity X to number speed. Does it need to be times by -1? Play animation run, and set X scale of myself to 1, not -1. Okay. If you're able to look at my screen, I'll zoom in on them for you just so that you can see how they should be. Okay. So that's how they should look. Okay. There we go, and Andrew's popped a screenshot up as well, Daisy, so you can see how they should look, okay?
So on the right arrow pressed, I've got the if do statement, and I've got current animation is not equal to dying.
Yeah.
At velocity X number speed, a animation run, and set X scale of myself to 1.
That's right, absolutely. Perfect. So, as we know from before, what that's doing is we're saying that the speed of our character, so every time we press the right arrow, it'll move in at a certain speed. It's going to play the run animation, and that set X scale of myself to 1 block. It's based on the way that the character sprite appears. So if you're pressing the right arrow, it faces to the right. If you press the left arrow, it flips it. So that's what that -1 is in the when the left arrow is pressed. That set X scale of myself to -1 is so that it flips the character sprite around so that it's facing to the left. So that's what that block is doing. Okay.
When right arrow is released, is that exactly the same as pressed?
So when it's released, it should have the set velocity X to 0 and play animation idle. Okay, I've zoomed into those for you on the live stream so that you can see them as well. Okay, and they're also in Andrew's screenshot as well. You should be able to see them in there. So what will happen is as soon as you release that right arrow or left arrow key, they'll stop moving and they won't play any further animation. Okay, it's just so that way we've got. It's just so that way they don't keep on moving as soon as you release the arrow key.
What should the left arrow release be? Exactly the same.
Exactly
as right?
the same as the right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Are you all right to move on, Daisy, or do you want a little bit more time?
I think I'm all right to move on.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, perfect. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to now add in that projectile that I mentioned earlier. Okay, there's quite a lot of code with this, so I'll go through it nice and slowly. I'll stop at regular points, and then if there's anything that you need to ask, just pop it up in the chat, okay? So we're going to exit out of our character script now, and make sure that you hit that save button so that it's all saved up, okay? Now, I'll just show you from last time. What we did last time, if you all remember, is over in our NPC, in the script that we created before for our NPC, you might remember that we added this bit of code, okay, which was the if instance toucher has tag bullet, set number health to number health minus 25, okay. What we're going to do this time is we're actually going to add the projectile now, which is going to act as our bullet, so to speak, which we can use to defend ourselves against the NPC, okay? So you don't need to do any editing to that NPC script, okay? I was just showing you what we did last time as a quick reminder. So first thing that you need to do is go to this media menu, okay, and making sure that you're on the objects layer, okay, so make sure that you're on the objects layer. We're going to choose from the menu on the left, we're going to choose this object, okay, so from the effects menu, we're going to choose this object, which is the fireball, which is the third item along in the second row from the effects menu, okay? And we're going to place that just in front of our playable character, okay? So the reason that I've chosen that one is because it is quite tiny. You are welcome to use one of the other ones, however, it does mean that they can be quite big, and it can take up a sort of a lot of space in the screen. So it's easier if you used one of the smaller ones. Now, if you wanted to, you can choose another one, like I've done there, and you can shrink it down if you want to. Okay, that's absolutely fine. But the one I've chosen is already quite small. So yeah, absolutely. Like Andrew's done there, you can choose that one. You can choose the other fireball. Just make sure that it's nice and small on the screen, because otherwise it can get a bit in the way when you're shooting it. So just make sure that it's nice and small. Okay. So just choose one of those effects and place it in front of the playable character. Yeah, absolutely, Daisy, no problem. So from the medium, so on the left of the screen, you'll see you've got the words media code and levels. So on the media section, okay, if you scroll down to the effects menu, we just want you to choose one of these effects. Now, I've chosen the third one along in the second row because it's already quite a small one, but you can choose one of the other ones. Just make sure that it's a nice and small kind of object, okay? And then once you've done that, right-click on it, and we're going to edit it. So we're going to add a script to it, okay? So we're going to get taken now to this blank script screen like before. Okay. Is everyone up to date? Anyone want me to wait a little bit longer? Are we all okay to carry on? Just let me know in the chat if you want me to wait a bit longer. Okay, super. So, like I said, this code that we're making now is actually going to be for our projectile. Okay, So the first set of blocks that we're going to add essentially say what's going to happen to that projectile when it's created. Okay, so that meaning as soon as the game loads, what's going to happen to that projectile. So to do that, we're going to go to the events menu, and we're going to use this when created block. Okay, we're going to drag that in there. And what we want to do is we want to make this block, projectile completely invisible from the moment that the script loads up, okay, so that we can't see it, because otherwise it'll be floating around on the screen as we move through the game, and we don't really want that. So to do that, if you go to the looks menu, you can use this set visibility of myself to true block, okay. Now, one thing that I'll just give you a quick reminder on, when it says myself, it doesn't mean the playable character. The myself block refers to whatever object's script you're editing. So whatever script you're editing, the myself block represents the object that you're editing, okay? And of course, we don't want to be able to see that, so we're going to set it to false. So as soon as as soon as the game loads, we're going to make our projectile completely invisible, okay? We also don't want to have its physics enabled either, because otherwise we'd be able to bump into it and it would stop us from moving through the game. So to do that, we're going to go to the physics menu, and right the way down the bottom, we're going to use this set physics enabled true block. And of course, like with the visibility, we're going to set that to false. And we also need to name our object. So we're going to give it a tag. So from the sensing menu, we're going to use this add tag name on myself block, and I'm going to call mine bullet. Okay, but it's entirely up to you what you call it. Just remember what it is called. The only thing to remember when you're giving the tag name is you need to make sure that it matches the name of the NPC, whatever you told the NPC it needed to react to. So like I showed you earlier, when we were on that NPC, you could see that its health was going to be decreased by 25 every time it was hit with a bullet, okay, by an object with the tag name of bullet. So you just need to make sure that whatever you call whatever tag name you give your bullet object, you just need to make sure that it matches what the NPC is programmed to react to, okay? So that's the first bit of code that we're doing so far. Does anybody have any questions on that so far? I won't move on just yet. I'll let everybody catch up first. But has anyone got any questions or anything they want me to go over again before we move on? So the add tag block, Daisy, is under sensing, and you should find it under the tagging menu. So if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see the tagging menu, and it's the first one under the tagging heading, which is add tag name on myself. That's the one you need. And then you just need to call it. If you're using, for those of you who are using my template that I uploaded earlier, you'll need to give it the tag name of bullet. If you're using your own game, just make sure that you call the tag whatever your NPC is programmed to react to reduce its health, okay? Okay, super. So, what we need to do now, wonderful. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to set some code which essentially says when we press a particular button, the projectile will actually fire, okay? So that we're able to use it to attack our NPCs. So from events, you can take a block from the keyboard section, which is when \delete is pressed, okay? Now, I'm going to change my button to being a space bar, but it's entirely up to you what you choose. Okay, whatever button you feel comfortable using to launch your projectiles, you can choose. But I'm going to choose the when spacebar is. I'm going to use the spacebar, so I've changed my block to being when spacebar is pressed. Okay, it's entirely up to you what you choose. One thing that we need to start off with here is we need to set a variable that's going to control the time in which the projectile is traveling, okay? What we're going to do in this script is we're going to set two aspects of, we're going to add in two elements which determines how long the bullet can travel for, okay? So we're going to add in a variable that controls its time, so that we're able to essentially say, okay, it can only travel for this long before it gets destroyed. And we're also going to add in some code that says that as soon as it touches an object, it gets destroyed. So it resets so that you can fire another one, okay? So we're going to add in 2 bits of code to do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add in a new variable. So just a normal variable, create variable, and I'm calling mine time, okay, but it's entirely up to you what you call it, and this once again is going to be a number variable. So from variables, we're creating a new variable that I'm going to call time, and I'm going to set my time variable to being 2, okay, and what that 2 is going to represent is 2 seconds of time. Now, of course, it doesn't necessarily have to be 2 seconds on your script. You can set it to 3 seconds, you can set it to 1 second. It's entirely up to you how long you would like your bullet to be able to travel for before it gets destroyed. Okay, so it's entirely up to you. Now, when the space bar is pressed, we of course want to be able to see our bullet traveling. So these 2 blocks up here in the when created block, the visibility and physics blocks, I'm going to duplicate those and I'm going to pop them down here and I'm going to set them both to being true. Okay, so now as soon as my spacebar is pressed, we're setting a timer, or we'll be setting a timer in a second, which determines how long my bullet can travel for before it gets destroyed. We're going to be able to see that bullet traveling through the air, and we're also going to set it to physics, its physics to be true, so that way we're able to actually see it traveling and we're able to actually have it react to hitting an obstacle. Okay? Is everyone happy with that so far? Does anyone have any questions? Please remember to put them up in the chat if you have any questions. Super. Okay, that's great, Jack. Okay. So we'll carry on, and then if anyone needs me to go over anything else, just let me know. We're going to add in some code now. This is the part that gets a little bit dense. So if I am going too fast, just let me know. Okay, it's just this part that's a little bit confusing. So we need to tell our game how to control our playable, how to control our bullet. So what we need to say is, depending on what way our playable character is facing, we need to get our bullets to face that direction. Okay, and we also need to specify how quickly we'd like our bullet to be able to travel, because otherwise it's just going to remain standing still in one place. So from our control flow menu, we're going to use a new if statement, okay? And we're going to change this if statement to being an else if. So to do that, we can click on that little star symbol and drag the else if block. So that way now we're saying, if a certain condition is true, run some code. Else if this condition is true, we're going to run some code, okay? That's where we're going to go with it. That's what we're going to do now, okay? So to close that pop-up menu, you can just click on the little star symbol again, okay? Now what we need to do is we need to associate our bullet object with our playable character, okay? So we can link our playable character to our bullet object in the following way. We're going to take an operator and we're going to use this equals to one like we have before. Okay, and I'm going to need two of these, so I'm going to duplicate it so that we have two of them. And we're going to set that up to the two if statements. So if something, else if something. Now, for the first one, we're going to say greater than, and for the second one, we're going to say less than. So what we're going to be checking now is if something is greater than something, do something, else if something is less than something, do something. Okay? And what we need to be doing is checking the scale of our character. And what I mean by that is, what direction is our playable character facing? Okay, are they facing to the left or are they facing to the right? So what we're going to do is we're going to go to this transform menu and we're going to use this scale X of myself block. Okay, and again we're going to need two of these, so I'm going to duplicate them and I'm going to set one for the first if statement and I'm going to set the second one to the else if statement. Now naturally we don't want to be checking what my scale is, okay? We want to be checking what the playable character's scale is. So if you remove those myself blocks, you can replace those with a block from sensing, which is under tagging, it's first instance by tag name, first instance by tag name, okay? And we're going to slot that into there, and we're going to duplicate that so that once again we've got two of them. Now the tag name that we need to be checking is whatever tag name we have given our playable character. So in my case, and if for those of you who are using my template, it will be by first instance by tag name player. Okay, so we're going to be checking whatever the playable character's scale is, and that's how we've linked the two together. Now, what we need to check is whether or not the scale of the playable character is greater than 0, which means they're facing to the right, or if their scale is less than 0, which means they're facing to the left. Okay, so we can do that by taking from the operators menu the 0 block, and again we can duplicate that so that we've got two of them, and you can see here now that we are checking whether or not the scale of my playable character is facing to the left or facing to the right. Okay, so that's what we've got there so far. Once we've done that, we need to set how quickly our playable character, our projectile can travel. So we can once again set its velocity. So from the physics menu, we can use this set velocity x0 block. And again, we need two of those, one for each direction. And I'm going to set mine to being 500. Now again, it's entirely up to you how quickly you would like your bullet to be able to travel. If the playable character is facing to the right, then we would like our bullet to travel at 500 units to the right. But of course, if they're facing to the left, we want the bullet to be travelling in the opposite direction, which means it needs to be negative 500. Because otherwise, if we just set it to 500, it'll mean that even though the character is facing to the left, the bullet is going to travel to the right, and of course we don't want that. And to get our bullet to face the correct direction, from the transform menu, we can use the set X position of myself to 0 block. Again, we want two of those, and we want it to be set to 1 if we're facing to the right, and -1 if we're facing to the left. Okay, so I'll just recap on that once again. We're checking, using this if-else statement, what direction the playable character is facing. If they're facing to the right, i.e. if their scale is greater than 0, then we would like our bullet to travel in 500 units to the right, and we want the object to be facing right. And if the scale of the playable character is less than 0, that meaning it's facing the left, then we would like to set the velocity to be negative 500, and we want the bullet object to be facing the left, so we're setting its position to being -1. Okay, so I'll leave that up on my screen for a second before we move on. Does anyone have any questions on that so far? I know it's a little bit confusing, so if anyone has any questions, just let me know.
Are you able to leave that bit up on your screen just for a minute?
Absolutely.
On the out if bit.
Absolutely. So Andrew's also posted a screenshot up, Daisy, in case you need to, if you want something, if you know the stream's a bit laggy or something, it's up there in the chat as well. Okay. So what Andrew's got there, I'm not sure if you take a look at Andrew's screenshot, he's actually got some comments. So you'll see that there's some double slashes, and he's put player looking right, player looking left. Those double slashes represent comments. So comments, as I've mentioned before, are really, really useful in coding, because it means that if you're working on a program and a few days later you get back to it, and you realize that you've forgotten what a bit of code is doing, or why it's doing something in particular, if you've commented it, it means that you're able to remind yourself why it's doing that particular thing. Okay. Yes, Alex, I can see how that might be a. I can see how. Yeah. So we'll be fixing that in a second. Don't worry.
And just for this point in the program, I think if you came back to it, you wouldn't know what you're kind of looking at. So having a copy of that, and it just quickly enables you to go, okay, we're looking right, so we're checking forward, right, we're looking left. This is what happens when we look left.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's essentially, it's a good way of reminding yourself, as well as other people who might use your code. Because if you one day, write this really incredible, fantastic bit of code that no one has ever thought of before, they might want to know how it works. And so by commenting it, you can remind yourself, as well as the person who's reading your code, how it works, why it does a certain thing, and things like that. Okay. So I'll move on to talking about this. So the next section, which is essentially how we can. So as everyone can probably see from the screenshot that Alex has put up, at the moment the projectile is kind of pointing directly at your playable character's head, which isn't an ideal situation for the playable character to be in. So what we're going to do is we're going to adapt this code a little bit now, so that it's positioned a bit more central to your playable character. Okay. So we're going to start off with a block from the transform menu. And the block that we're going to use is the set x position of myself to block. Okay. So it's set x position of myself to 0. And we're going to need a total of 2 of these. And the second one is going to be for the y position. Okay, so we're saying set x position of myself to 0, set y position of myself to 0. Okay, now we don't want it to be set to 0, so we're going to throw those away. And what we're going to do is we're going to set it to being in relation to the center of the playable character. Okay. So from the operators menu, you can use this 1+1 block. Okay. And again, we're going to need 2 of those, so make sure that you duplicate them. And we're going to slot those in to there. And what we're going to be doing is checking whether or not, what we're going to be doing is basing the position of our projectile to being in relation to the center of our playable character. So we can use from the transform menu this center X position of myself block. Okay, and we're going to slot that in there. Now we of course don't want to be centering the X position of myself, so I'm going to remove those, but instead we want it to be centering the X position of first instance by tag name player, like we've done up here. Okay, make sure that as well for the set Y position of myself to block that you've also changed the center Y position of myself block to being the Y. Okay, so from the sensing menu, we're going to once again take from tagging this first instance by tag name block. Okay, make sure again that you've got 2 of those, and we're going to change it to being player so that we're checking whether or not our bullet object is in relation to the center of our playable character. Now, where you position your bullet is up to you, okay? But what these 2 plus symbols are doing here, so where it says +1, that is how far in front for the X position and how far up for the Y position we want our bullet to be when we shoot it, okay? Now, I have set mine to being 0 and 10, okay, so that it is where we're centering the bullet via the X-axis, it's centered directly in the middle, and it's about 10 units up, so it's going to be right in front of the playable character and about 10 units above the center of the playable character, okay? It is entirely up to you how you position yours, but if you want it to be set relatively central and directly in front of your playable character, then set it to 0 and 10. Okay, I'll show you in a second what happens when you change those units around. Now these 2 blocks that we've just made, both of them need to be duplicated so that we've got 4 of them all together so that it looks somewhat like that. And I need you to drag them so that they're positioned inside of the if statements that we made earlier. Okay, so it looks somewhat like this. So again, I know there's an awful lot of code there now and there's a lot of confusing blocks. So I'll leave that up on the screen for a little while and I'll just run through it again. So essentially, we're going to be setting the position of the bullet object to being relative to the center of the playable character's position, okay? And I've set mine to being 0 units in front, so it launches directly from the playable character, and 10 units above the center of the playable character with the y-axis. Okay, I know it sounds quite confusing, so does anybody want me to go over that again? Is there anything that you're not sure of? I know it's quite confusing, so just let me know if there is anything you want me to go over again.
I'm sure I've missed a load.
That's all right.
I've missed lots. Right, so I am up to the point where am I to X position of myself to and the Y one? Where are they supposed to be going?
Okay, so under the if statements that we've, the if and the else if that we made earlier.
Yeah.
So that needs to be in they need to go into the do section for both the if and the else if. Okay. So essentially, all these blocks of code are doing are saying where we're positioning the bullet object in relation to the playable character. Okay.
They're going underneath the set X position of myself to -1.
Absolutely, yeah, that's where they're going. So you'll need to do that for both the if and the else if. So you should have what would be a total of 4 of those blocks altogether. So you need an X and a Y position for the if statement, and you need an X and a Y position for the else if statement as well. Okay, I put it up on the screen in case you need to check it for reference. Okay, essentially what it's doing, like I said, it's saying where we're going to be positioning that bullet object in relation to the playable character.
I'm talking to my cat. She's
That's
just
alright.
like the funny cat. She meows because you leave her alone and you won't talk to her.
Looking for attention.
Yeah.
That's alright. Have you got all caught up with that, Daisy? Do you want me to wait a little bit longer?
No. I got it all.
You got it all. Wonderful. So Andrew's popped that up on the screen for you as well, okay? For those of you who need to, just in case you need to catch up. So those two blocks that Andrew's popped up on the screen, they need to be in the if and the else if, okay? So that way it doesn't matter what direction the playable character is facing, we'll still end up with, the bullet will still be positioned in the same place. Now, I mentioned at the start that we need a way of controlling how far our bullet can travel before it destroys itself, okay? So we're going to add, of course, a timer, and we're also going to say what happens when the bullet comes into contact with a specific object or obstacle, okay? So first thing we're going to do is I'm going to add in from the control flow menu, sorry, not from the control flow menu, from the physics menu, when I am touched, get toucher, okay? Essentially what we're going to do is say as soon as it touches something, it's going to disappear from the screen and it's going to no longer have any physics tied to it, okay? So what we're going to do, from the looks menu, we're going to use the set visibility of myself to true block, if my Mac will let me drag it out, there we go. And we're going to set it to false. So this time, as soon as it touches something, it's going to just turn invisible. And we're also going to set the physics to false as well. So you can do that using that block from the physics menu, which was set physics enabled to true. We're just going to change that to false, okay? So that's all you need to do for that section. So I'll just leave that up for now. How are your new horses, Daisy? Are they all right? I remember you mentioning before that they were that you've just had some new horses. Have you got it back working, Oliver? Is the keyboard working again?
Where's the when I am touched, get toucher block?
So that is under control flow, Daisy. Sorry, not control flow, physics.
You may have heard that like
I
cry
did hear it.
What was my cat?
That's all right. Yes, Daisy, did you say you'd had some new horses recently? How are they? How are they doing?
They're all alright.
Oh, good. That's great.
Seven foals.
That's right. I remember you saying a few weeks ago that everything's okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. That's good news.
I've got one tiny one, which is like smaller than me.
Oh, bless. That's really cute.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you managed to get all... Is everybody okay with that so far? Super. Okay. So that bit of code that we've just added now is essentially going to be controlling what happens as soon as our playable character, well, as soon as our bullet object touches a specific obstacle. Okay, it'll just destroy itself. It will disappear from the screen, and that'll be it. Okay. We need to now add a bit of code that will sort of get tied in with our time variable that we created at the start. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a new block from events, which is this every 100 milliseconds block. Now we're going to change that 100 milliseconds to being 1000 milliseconds, because 1000 milliseconds is a second. So every second we want to change something so that it will, so that every time a second passes, our time variable gets changed. Okay. So what we can do, we can go to variables and we can actually use that set number time block. Okay. And what we can do is every second, so every 1000 milliseconds, we can decrease the value of time. Now you might remember at the start when we created this when spacebar is pressed block, we set our time variable to 2, or we set it, or you might have set it to a separate value altogether. And so the idea is that every 1000 seconds, 1000 milliseconds, our time variable will get decreased by 1. Okay. So what you can do from the operators menu, we can take this 1 + 1 block, change the +1 to being a -1, and we can say that we change our number time variable to being -1. Okay, so that is essentially what's happening there. So every 1 second, our time variable's value will get decreased by 1. Now we need to say what will happen if our number time variable reaches 0. Okay, so we can do that using an if statement. So from control flow, we can grab another one of these if statements, and we want to say what will happen if our number time variable is equal to 0. Okay, so we can use another one of our Boolean operators, which is the equals block up here, and we can essentially say that if number time is equal to 0, we want it to do exactly the same thing that it does when it comes into contact with an obstacle. Okay, so if we right click on and duplicate that number time variable and we say equal to 0, so we can take another one of our operators, we can now say that as soon as it reaches 0, we want to set the visibility of the bullet to false, and we want its physics to be set to false as well. So we can just duplicate those 2 blocks that are in the when I am touched get toucher block. Okay, and we can slot those in there. Once you've done that, that is then the end of the code for the projectile. Okay. And what I'll do now is I'll bring this code back up on the screen in a second, but I'll just show you what it does. So when I hit play, it will ask me to save it. So I'm just going to save my code as bullet. Okay, save the script as bullet. And as soon as I hit play now, and the game loads, you should see that you're able to shoot out some bullets. Now, sometimes you might find that there is a little bit of a bug. Okay, so I'm going to have a look at how I can fix that. And one thing that is important to remember is that when you do create things with code, you're not always, sometimes you won't get it perfect first time. Okay, so you can see now with mine, when I'm facing to the right, my bullet is just traveling through the air, but when I'm facing to the left, the bullet is still spawning from behind me and it's pushing me backwards. So I'm going to go and have a look at where I'm going wrong with that down here. So let's have a look at why I am having that problem.
I've missed quite a bit because of my cat.
That's all right. I'm currently troubleshooting my code, so don't worry.
I am currently, I've got the every 100 milliseconds set number time to.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. So that is the code. I've just popped it on my screen now. You should be able to see it. I'm just trying to work out why my code is deciding to not play ball. It's being a little bit finicky. Okay. So if you set, so I can see that some of you are saying the bullet doesn't show, it doesn't exist. Bullet spawns on the side of the screen. One thing that I can suggest for that is make sure that your bullet is placed directly in front of the playable character. So make sure that when the game loads, it's placed directly in front of the playable character, and make sure that you walk over the area in which the bullet is located. So what will happen then is it will, it's kind of like your character is picking up the bullet type thing, okay? With yours, Alex, I'm just trying to work out myself why my code isn't working, so I'll get back to you on that. Yes, Andrew.
For facing right, you have positive values on the X when you're setting the position. When you're facing left, you would have negative values. So in your second else if...
there we go. Change those round to being negative values.
I think Y is... just have a look at mine. Y can still be positive because that's up and down, but X would... You need to put a -10. Or some kind of negative figure.
Okay. We'll try that out. Bullet just bounces off the character and still doesn't show this. Okay. Do you want to pop some screenshots of your code in to the chat and we'll take a look at it?
If you have a look in the chat now, you should see why.
Right. Can you put the code back up? Because cat's just been mowing again.
That's alright.
It's the worst. It's the funniest cat, I think.
That's okay. Yeah, we'll get back to that now in just a second, Daisy, don't worry. So the first set of code, Daisy, is up in the chat now. The bit with the 100 milliseconds will pop up in just a second. So for some...
Just go back. So when you're setting X position, just so it seems consistent, when you're looking right, set X position to +10. So put the mouse up a bit.
Ah, yeah. There we go.
And then on the second one, you'd have a -10, so it's facing the opposite direction.
Yeah, that's it.
If you try that, that should work.
If my code decides not to work now, then I'm not sure why. Yeah, it's a bit strange why it's decided to not work. So the code that we put up should be absolutely fine. I think my game fruit is having a moment, but the code that Andrew has put up on the screen should be absolutely fine. I believe I made an alternative bullet code earlier. So if I just go and get that 1 second. There may be somewhere, buried somewhere I've made another bullet code, and it does work in the same way. I'm not sure why my code isn't working now, but the code that Andrew has put up in the chat should be absolutely fine. I think mine's just having a little bit of a moment. Let me have a look at yours, Alex. If anyone else is having some issues with the code, just let me know, and we'll try and get to the bottom of it.
I'm missing a bit of the code, which is the 100 milliseconds bit.
Yeah, so you want to change that, Daisy, to being 1,000 milliseconds. And then I've popped it up on the screen now, okay, what bit of code you need for that. Yeah, is everybody else doing okay? Or are we still having some problems? Just let me know if we're still having problems. Still spawns on the side of the map. Okay. Alex, are you using MyScript? Or are you using your own script? As in, are you using the template that I uploaded earlier, or are you using mine? You're using yours, okay. So, one thing to double check, Alex, is check your... So you know where you've put the first instance by tag name? Just double check the tag name is correct, just to make sure that they're definitely all correct, because that could be one reason why your bullet's spawning a little bit further away, because it's not associating it with the tag name of the actual object of the playable character. We'll have Oliver, do you want to pop a screenshot up of your code as well, Oliver, and we'll take a look at that. Thank you. Let's have a look. Okay, time to player. So Oliver, for the if and the else if, it's okay, I can see it. Do you see your player? You've put scale X of first instance by tag player. You'll need a lowercase p there, not an uppercase P. That will probably be why yours isn't working.
This is a big part of coding. There's always debugging and trying to resolve
Absolutely,
issues.
yeah. So you'll often find that there's if you got it, Alex, perfect. That's brilliant. So like I said, you won't always get things done first time. So it's really important that, you know, I've worked on assignments and things like that where I've spent ages and ages trying to find where one bit of code wasn't working, and it turned out that it was just because of one small typo, or I put, you know, one small bit of code in the wrong place, and it's completely thrown the program off. So sometimes you will find that something really, really small that seems really, really simple is the reason why your code isn't working. So if you've all got that to work, then well done, that's really great. Like I said, I'm not sure why mine has decided to not work today. It's just decided to have a little bit of a moment, I think. But either way, if everybody else is working, that's the main thing. I'll try and get to the bottom of why mine isn't working later on. But as long as everybody else's is working, that's fine. So we have got to 6 o'clock today. I know we didn't cover everything that we were going to today, but that's okay because we've got next week as well. Is there anything that anybody would like to ask me or Andrew before we finish up for today, or are we, or is everyone happy?
I'm just trying to hit at the moment and seeing if it's working.
That's fine. No problem.
I get to the non-playable character that we're trying to defeat. My bullet doesn't come out. It doesn't exist.
Okay, so when you launch the projectile, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It just isn't there. Okay, you want to pop a screenshot up in the chat then, and we'll have a look. Oliver, if I'm pointing left, it just pushes me and doesn't move. Okay, so we seem to be out.
But when I go the bottom bit to get in front of the non-playable character, it just goes really high above me.
Right. Okay. That's fine. If you pop, like I said, Oliver and Daisy, pop us up a couple more screenshots in the chat, and we'll have a quick look. Because I think this is an issue that we all seem to be having at the moment. Fizz, to answer your question on what we will be doing after Game Fruit, we're not 100% sure yet. We're still, Andrew and I are still having a think about where we're going to move things on after Game Fruit.
I'm getting this.
Is it?
What?
No, what you put on me. No, I know what you did.
Okay. So, Oliver, if you want to pop a screenshot up in the chat, and Alex, if we can't get to a solution today, don't worry, because I will find a fix and I'll post it in Discord so that you all know how we can come to the bottom of it. That's all right, Alex, no worries. Thank you for joining today. Like I said, as soon as I get a solution for that sorted, I'll let you know. Oliver, let's have a look. I'll just have a look at yours now, Oliver. Okay, yeah, so yours looks pretty much exactly the same to how it should do. Okay. Okay, that's fine. So, like I said, there seems to be a bit of a problem with the projectile code. Not 100% sure where that problem is just yet. What we'll do is I'll get a solution in place, and then I'll let you all know what that solution is, and then we can quickly pop it in next week, or we can, or you're welcome to sort of add it in during the week. It's very, very strange because why it's decided to have why it's decided to not work today. But there's no need to worry. Like I said, if anybody else manages to find a solution, please remember to pop it up in Discord, and we'll also kind of take a look at it. We'll set that, if you like, as maybe this week's challenge for next week, trying to figure out why our projectile isn't facing in the right direction. So if anybody comes up with a solution, let me know. Otherwise, don't worry, because I will get to the bottom of it, and I will post something in Discord with an explanation as to why that's not working. So other than the projectile having a few niggly issues, does anyone have any other Game Fruit related questions for Andrew and I before we finish up?
Chris, I'm just having a look through your code, and this could be a problem for quite a few of you. So Dan, if you scroll down to where when I am touched, get touched.
Mm-hmm.
What this is doing here is it's instantly destroying your bullet because the bullet is touching the player. So you'd have to set the X position of the bullet sufficiently far enough away from the player. So when you scroll up there,
Absolutely.
See where you set X and then center X off of the player.
Yeah.
Choose a value that's maybe greater than 20. So the bullet actually, well, for that one, it would be minus 20 maybe. And for facing right, it would be plus 20. So the bullet starts off not touching the player.
Yeah.
At the moment, you're saying when it touches something in the world, we destroy it. And as soon as you start using it,
Yes.
you made a mistake there, Dan, and you saw it.
Yes.
So if you go back to your code I think you put double back.
Oh yeah, sorry.
So maybe just change the first one to a plus and then get rid of the minus. And change it so it's easy to read. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense. So the bullet is starting out previously when it's touching the player, which means we get rid of the bullet straight away. So we need to actually start the bullet off away from the player so it can travel.
Yeah, so at the moment, still not working, Oliver. Okay, don't worry. Like I said, we'll I'll figure out a solution, and I'll let you all know what the solution is in Discord this week. But what Andrew was saying was that we need to set our X position of the bullet to being slightly further forwards than what we were originally, because otherwise it was just completely disintegrating the moment that we try and launch it. I'm not sure if tomorrow's session is on, Chris. I'm afraid. Okay.
I presume this one tomorrow. I think Jack runs them every week.
Yeah. Okay. So, apologies everybody for the slight issue with the bullet's positioning. I'll work on a solution for you all this week, and then I'll post it up in Discord. Like I said, not sure what's going on there. It's obviously having a bit of a moment, but don't worry, we'll try and fix it, and we'll get back to you on that. So, like I said, for next week, we'll be looking at potentially that being the last session on Game Fruit. So we'll just tidy up the game a little bit and add in one or two more things just to kind of finish off the game. We'll add in a few more levels. We'll get this bullet issue fixed up, and then we'll kind of move, and then we'll be moving on to something new. Like I said, Andrew and I we've started planning what we'll be doing next, but we're not 100% sure just yet. So for the time being, as soon as we know, we'll let you know in the Discord where we're going to be moving on to. But other than that, is everybody happy? Does anyone want us to answer any other questions, or are we okay? No worries, Jack. Thank you for joining today. No worries, Chris. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next week. We'll see you all next week in so it'll be usual time next week. Next week will be the usual Wednesday 4 till 6, and it'll be the Club M Spark session as well. So it'll be the usual Club M Spark slot next Wednesday as well. So that'll be happening next week.
As well, with next week, we're going to just kind of wrap up Game Fruit in a way, and then we're going to share the game so we get a chance to actually see what everyone's been working on and developing. So if you want to build up your game through the week, something to try.
Absolutely. Right, I'll just stop the streams off. Okay, so like I said, thank you very much again, everybody. Thank you for joining in today. We'll see you all